Story number 1. Whispers on Tahoe's Dark Waters. December 2005. The night was unusually cold for Lake Tahoe. The air crisp and biting as I navigated my small rowboat across its expansive, glassy surface. I'm Michael Carter, an avid solo rower and photography enthusiast, always seeking the tranquility that only early morning or late-night paddles could offer. But that night, the lake held a different kind of serenity, one that would soon turn into a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. I had set out around midnight, the moon casting a silver path across the water, guiding me deeper into the heart of the lake. The surrounding mountains loomed like silent sentinels, their peaks shrouded in darkness. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of the oars against the hull and the distant call of nocturnal birds. It was the perfect setting for reflection, away from the chaos of daily life. As I rowed further from shore, the world seemed to dissolve into the stillness of the night. The lights of nearby towns were mere pinpoints of distant glimmer, and the vastness of the lake felt both liberating and isolating. I paused for a moment, allowing myself to soak in the beauty of the secluded landscape, capturing the scene through my camera lens. Then, amidst the silence, I heard it, a faint melody drifting over the water. At first, I thought it was the wind, or perhaps the distant hum of a boat engine. But the tune was too melodic, too deliberate to be mere nature. It was a hauntingly beautiful song, with lyrics that seemed to speak directly to my soul. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, I followed the sound, rowing towards its source. The music led me to a deserted shore, the outline of an old wooden pier barely visible in the moonlight. The singing grew louder, more distinct, and I felt an inexplicable urge to discover who or what was behind it. As I approached the pier, the melody shifted, taking on a melancholic tone that sent shivers down my spine. I disembarked from the boat, the wooden planks beneath my feet creaking under the weight of my curiosity. The pier stretched out into the darkness, the end fading into the inky blackness of the lake. I scanned the area, but there was no sign of anyone, just the empty expanse of water reflecting the cold light of the moon. "Hello," I called out softly, my voice breaking the oppressive silence. No response. The only thing I could hear was the echo of my own voice mingling with the fading notes of the song. I took a few steps forward, the chill of the night air biting at my skin, and the sense of being watched grew stronger. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement, a fleeting shadow behind the broken railing, just beyond the reach of the moonlight. My heart raced as I turned to look, but there was nothing there. The apparition was gone, leaving me alone with my racing thoughts and the lingering melody that seemed to seep into my very being. I decided to investigate further, moving along the pier towards the center where the song seemed to originate. The air grew colder, and the darkness around me thickened, as if the night itself was pressing in on me. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, illuminating the peeling paint and rusted nails of the old structure. As I reached the midpoint of the pier, the singing ceased abruptly, replaced by an eerie silence that felt almost tangible. I stood there, breathless, trying to make sense of what I had just experienced. Suddenly, the temperature dropped sharply, my breath visible in the frigid air, and a heavy fog began to roll in from the lake, enveloping the pier in a ghostly haze. Through the mist, a figure began to materialize, a woman in a flowing white dress, her hair cascading over her shoulders like liquid silver. Her eyes were hollow, voids that seemed to stare right through me, filled with sorrow and longing. She began to move towards me, her steps silent on the old wood. "Why are you here?" I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible over the sound of my own heartbeat. She stopped just a few feet away, her presence overwhelming. "I was lost," she said, her voice a haunting echo. "I couldn't find my way home." Before I could respond, the fog thickened, and the lake around us began to churn violently. The once calm waters now roiled with dark energy, waves crashing against the pier with unnatural force. I grabbed her hand, desperate to offer comfort, but her touch was icy cold. sending a jolt of fear through my entire body. "You must remember us," she continued, her eyes pleading. "We are trapped between worlds, lost and searching for peace." The ground beneath us seemed to shake, the pier creaking ominously as if under immense pressure. The sky above darkened, clouds swirling in a vortex of turmoil, blocking out the moonlight and plunging us into darkness. The singing returned, louder and more intense, as if the spirits themselves were crying out in anguish. I tried to pull away, but an invisible force held me in place, my feet rooted to the spot. The woman's form began to fade, her features blurring as the fog swallowed her whole. "Help us," she cried, her voice now a distant whisper, "or join us in our eternal sorrow." The boat began to tilt, the waves threatening to capsize it as the lake's malevolent energy surged around me. Panic set in as I struggled against the invisible grip, my mind racing with thoughts of survival and the horrifying possibility of being dragged into the depths alongside the lost souls of Tahoe. With a final burst of strength, I broke free from the force holding me, rowing as fast as I could back to my boat. The fog thickened around me, making it difficult to navigate, and the singing seemed to follow me, echoing through the night like a sinister lullaby. My hands trembled as I pushed the oars, desperately trying to escape the cursed melody that threatened to consume me. As I reached the safety of my boat, the singing faded abruptly, leaving me in an oppressive silence once more. The lake returned to its calm state, the fog dissipating as quickly as it had appeared. My heart pounded in my chest, the adrenaline of the encounter coursing through my veins. I didn't waste another moment, rowing back to shore with a mix of fear and relief washing over me. Upon reaching the dock, I turned to look back at the lake, half expecting to see the ghostly figure still lingering in the darkness. But there was nothing, no sign of the woman, no trace of the supernatural presence that had haunted me, just the serene beauty of Lake Tahoe, undisturbed and peaceful once again. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the memory of that night, the haunting melody, the sorrowful apparition, and the feeling of being watched haunted my dreams, a constant reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. I shared my story with friends and family, but their skeptical gazes and dismissive comments only deepened my sense of isolation. Determined to uncover the truth behind the ghostly encounter, I delved into local folklore and historical records. I learned about a tragic tale from the 19th century, a woman named Isabella Hartley who had drowned in the lake under mysterious circumstances. Her family had disappeared shortly after, leaving no trace, and legends had long circulated about her restless spirit haunting the shores of Tahoe, forever searching for her lost loved ones. The more I researched, the more I realized that my experience was part of a larger, tragic narrative woven into the very fabric of Lake Tahoe. The local stories about lost souls and eerie lights now made sense, their warnings etched into the landscape of the lake I had always cherished. One evening, driven by a mix of curiosity and a desire to put the haunting behind me, I returned to the pier. The moon was full, casting a silvery glow over the water, and the air was calm, the night peaceful. I sat on the edge, reflecting on the events that had transpired, when I heard it, the faint sound of singing once more, drifting over the water like a whisper on the wind. I looked up, half expecting to see Isabella again, but there was no one. The singing was soft, almost melancholic, a reminder of the sorrow that still lingered in the depths of Lake Tahoe. I took a deep breath, allowing the sound to wash over me, feeling a sense of connection to the lost souls who still sought peace. As I sat there, the wind picking up gently, I made a silent promise to honor their memories and share their stories, ensuring that Isabella Hartley and the other lost souls of Tahoe would never be forgotten. The lake had revealed its darkest secrets to me, teaching me that some places hold onto their tragedies, their echoes forever etched into the night. From that night on, my paddles rarely touched the water alone, whether out of respect or fear. I found solace in the company of others, sharing the haunting melody of Tahoe's lost souls. The whispers of Lake Tahoe became a part of me, a reminder of the thin line between reality and the supernatural, and the enduring power of a spirit's longing for peace. And so, the next time you find yourself alone on the waters of Lake Tahoe, listen closely to the night's silence. You might just hear the faint echoes of a sorrowful song, a haunting reminder that some spirits never find their way home, forever wandering the dark waters in search of what they lost. Story number 2. Echoes of Atacama. December 1994. The Atacama Desert sprawled endlessly before me, its barren landscape stretching as far as the eye could see. I'm Carlos Ramirez, a geologist with a passion for uncovering the secrets buried beneath the earth. When my team was assigned to conduct a geological survey in one of the driest places on Earth, I thought it was the perfect opportunity to push the boundaries of my research. Little did I know, the desert held mysteries far darker than the geological formations we sought to study. Our team consisted of 5 members. Myself, Elena Morales, our team leader, Miguel Torres, the field technician, Sofia Gutierrez, the environmental scientist, and 2 local guides, Juan and Ricardo. We set up camp near a remote outcrop, the isolation of the desert both exhilarating and intimidating. The sun blazed relentlessly during the day, but as night fell, the temperature plummeted, and an eerie silence enveloped the landscape. On our 3rd day, while exploring a newly discovered canyon, we stumbled upon something that sent a chill down our spines. Small, delicate footprints etched into the fine desert sand. They were unlike any animal tracks we had encountered before, too symmetrical and intricate to belong to any known creature in the region. Curiosity piqued. Elena decided to follow them, convinced they led to a significant geological find. "Be careful," Elena cautioned, though her enthusiasm was contagious. "These tracks could be fresh." She gave me a reassuring smile, her eyes sparkling with determination. "Don't worry, Carlos, this could be groundbreaking." As she ventured deeper into the canyon, the footprints continued, leading us further into an area devoid of vegetation or shelter. Miguel and Sofia joined her, leaving Juan and Ricardo to monitor our equipment. The air grew colder, and an unnatural stillness settled around us. We reached a small, flat area where the footprints abruptly ended, leading into a patch of sand that seemed untouched by time. Elena knelt down, examining the markings closely. "These aren't just footprints. Look at the patterns, symbols of some sort, maybe ancient petroglyphs." Before any of us could respond, a distant howl echoed through the canyon, a sound both haunting and mournful. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as a sense of foreboding washed over me. "We should head back," I suggested, the unease in my voice betraying my calm exterior. But Elena was already standing, her gaze fixed on something beyond the sand. "Wait, look over there." We followed her line of sight and saw a faint, flickering light emanating from the far end of the canyon. It was small at first, but as we approached, the light grew brighter, revealing the outline of an old, dilapidated structure. It looked like a hut, abandoned and worn by the harsh desert elements. "That's odd," Miguel remarked, his voice tense. "There are no ruins or settlements around here." Elena took a step forward, the light now revealing intricate carvings on the walls of the hut, symbols that matched those we had seen in the footprints. "This must be where the tracks lead. Let's investigate." With a mix of caution and curiosity, we entered the hut. The interior was dark, the only illumination coming from the flickering light source, a lantern hanging from the ceiling, swaying gently as if moved by an unseen hand. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of decay permeated the space. As our eyes adjusted to the dim light, we noticed a small journal lying on a wooden table in the center of the room. Elena reached for it, her fingers trembling slightly as she flipped it open. The pages were yellowed and brittle, the ink faded but still legible. October 12th, 1893. Today marks my 7th year in this forsaken land. The desert is unforgiving, but I find solace in the stars that light up the night sky. Yet, there are whispers in the wind, voices that call out to me from the shadows. I fear what lies beyond the horizon, but I cannot turn away. As Elena read aloud, a sudden gust of wind blew through the hut, extinguishing the lantern and plunging us into darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled to relight it, the room now colder and more oppressive. "Did you hear that?" Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible. Before we could respond, the journal slipped from Elena's hands, landing open on the floor. The words on the page had changed, the ink seemingly bleeding into new sentences. December 5th, 1893. They come for us when the moon is high. Do not follow the lights, for they lead to the end. The spirits of the desert are restless, seeking vengeance for forgotten lives. Protect yourselves and remember our warnings. A chill ran down my spine as the implications sank in. The journal was a dire warning, a glimpse into the fears of someone who had once inhabited this cursed land. We exchanged worried glances, the realization that we were not alone dawning on us. "Let's get out of here," I urged, my voice steady despite the fear gripping me. But as we turned to leave, the door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping us inside. The temperature dropped further, our breaths visible in the frigid air. The symbols on the walls began to glow with an eerie blue light, pulsating in time with the beat of our racing hearts. Suddenly, the hut was filled with the sound of children's laughter, a haunting, echoing melody that seemed to come from all around us. Shadows danced on the walls, morphing into the shapes of ghostly figures, children lost to the desert, their eyes hollow and empty. "Help us!" the voices cried out, a desperate plea that pierced through the oppressive silence. Elena backed away from the table, her face pale. "We need to find another way out." But every door and window was now obscured by the blue light, the symbols acting as a barrier that prevented our escape. The laughter grew louder, more intense, as the spirits of the desert began to close in on us, their presence suffocating and malevolent. "We're trapped," Miguel stated, his voice filled with despair. "We need to do something." Desperation fueled my actions as I tried to break the symbols. But they resisted, the blue light intensifying with each attempt. The air around us thickened, making it hard to breathe, as the spirits surrounded us, their ethereal forms pressing in with no intention of letting us go. Suddenly, the journal began to glow, the words lifting off the page and swirling around us like a protective barrier. The spirits recoiled, their expressions turning from sorrow to rage as the blue light flickered and dimmed. "Run!" I shouted, seizing the journal and pushing Elena and Miguel towards the door. We sprinted out of the hut, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as we left the cursed place behind. The blue light faded, the desert night returning to its natural stillness. Gasping for breath, we didn't stop until we reached the safety of our camp, the remnants of the hut and the symbols disappearing like a mirage. In the days that followed, we tried to piece together what had happened, the memory of the haunted hut lingering in our minds. The journal became our most valuable source of information, its warnings echoing in our thoughts as we tried to make sense of the supernatural events we had witnessed. One night, as we sat around the campfire, the stars shining brightly above, I reflected on the ordeal. The Atacama Desert had revealed its darkest secrets, teaching us that some mysteries are best left unexplored, their curses hidden beneath layers of sand and time. Years later, the story of our encounter in the Atacama Desert remains a cautionary tale among geologists and adventurers alike. The vanished footprints, the haunted hut, and the restless spirits serve as a reminder of the thin line between discovery and peril. And every time I gaze upon the endless expanse of the desert, I can't help but feel the lingering presence of those ancient souls, their whispers carried by the wind, urging us to heed their warnings and respect the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding. For in the heart of the Atacama, where the earth meets the sky in a barren embrace, the echoes of the past continue to resonate, a testament to the enduring power of forgotten lives and the unrelenting curse that binds them to the desolate sands. Story number 3. Shadows Through the Lens. December 2012. The Canadian winter had settled in with a fierce grip, transforming the landscape into a vast expanse of white silence. My name is Alex Turner, a professional photographer with a passion for abandoned places and forgotten histories. I had always been drawn to the eerie beauty of derelict structures, finding solace in their silent stories and decaying grandeur. It was during one such quest for the perfect shot that I stumbled upon the house that would haunt me forever. I had been exploring the remote fields of Manitoba, chasing the elusive play of light on snow and the stark contrasts of nature against man-made remnants. The area was sparsely populated, the nearest town miles away, making it the perfect spot for solitude and uninterrupted creativity. As dusk approached, I spotted a silhouette in the distance, a solitary house standing defiantly in the middle of an empty field. This presence was both captivating and unsettling, an architectural anomaly against the endless white. Curiosity piqued. I decided to investigate. The journey to the house was treacherous, the snow crunching under my boots and the cold biting through my layers. When I finally reached it, the house stood as a relic from another time, its windows shattered, walls weathered by years of neglect, and the roof sagging ominously. Despite its dilapidated state, there was an undeniable allure to it, a silent invitation to uncover its secrets. I set up my tripod and began to capture the house from various angles, the fading light adding a surreal quality to the shots. The isolation of the location heightened my senses, every creak of the wind through the broken panes sounding like whispers of the past. Satisfied with the day's work, I retreated to my tent, eager to review the photos that would later grace my portfolio. The next morning, wrapped in the warmth of my sleeping bag, I finally had the chance to examine the images. Most were typical shots of an abandoned house, empty windows, overgrown gardens, and the stark contrast of decaying wood against the pristine snow. But one photo stood out, sending a chill down my spine. There, in the frame of a shattered window, stood a shadowy figure. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably human. My heart raced as I zoomed in, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. I was alone in the field. No one accompanied me. The figure's presence was inexplicable, a ghostly sentinel watching over the desolate house. Unease settled over me as I pondered the implications. Had I imagined it? Or was the house truly inhabited by something or someone that defied explanation? Determined to find answers, I decided to return to the house the following day, despite the lingering fear that gnawed at my thoughts. 2 days later, under a sky blanketed with gray clouds, I made my way back to the house. The landscape seemed unchanged, the vast fields stretching out endlessly before me. As I approached, a sense of dread enveloped me. The house appeared more menacing, the shadows deepening, and the air thick with an unspoken tension. My footsteps were muffled by the fresh snow, and the cold seemed to seep into my bones, making each step a struggle. Upon reaching the house, I felt an invisible barrier, a resistance that made the structure seem almost alive. Ignoring the mounting fear, I pushed open the door, which groaned in protest, revealing the interior bathed in darkness. The remnants of furniture lay scattered, covered in thick layers of dust and cobwebs. The air was heavy, carrying the scent of mildew and decay. I ventured further inside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, illuminating the remnants of a life long abandoned. As I explored room by room, my unease grew. The house felt like a tomb, the silence oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of dripping water. I reached the living room, where an old fireplace stood cold and empty, its mantel adorned with remnants of bygone decorations. It was there that I noticed something strange, a series of old photographs lying on the floor, scattered as if someone had hurriedly abandoned them. Kneeling down, I picked up one, carefully dusting off the grime to reveal the faces of a family long gone. As I examined the photos, a sudden coldness filled the room, and the temperature seemed to drop drastically. My breath became visible, swirling in the frigid air. A soft, distant knocking echoed through the house, reverberating off the walls and sending shivers down my spine. I called out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" My voice seemed to get lost in the vast emptiness. Returning to me as an eerie echo, the knocking ceased abruptly, replaced by the faint sound of children's laughter, a sound that should not have existed in the abandoned house. Heart pounding, I turned towards the source of the noise, my flashlight beam dancing across the room until it settled on a figure standing at the far end. It was the same shadowy presence from my photograph, a ghostly figure, clad in tattered clothing, eyes hollow and void of life. The apparition didn't move, but its presence was overwhelming, filling the room with an intense sense of sorrow and despair. Frozen in fear, I watched as the figure slowly raised its hand, pointing towards the window. My mind raced, trying to comprehend the impossible sight. I wanted to turn and run, but my body refused to obey. The room seemed to close in around me, the walls pulsing with a malevolent energy that threatened to consume me. Summoning every ounce of courage, I backed away, my hands trembling as I tried to steady my breathing. "What do you want?" I managed to whisper, my voice cracking under the weight of fear. The figure remained silent, its gaze fixed on me with an intensity that felt like it could burn through my very soul. Suddenly, the apparition dissolved into a mist, swirling towards the window and merging with the fading light outside. The room returned to its oppressive silence, the air thick with the remnants of sorrow and loss. I stood there, shaken and terrified, realizing that the house held secrets far darker than I had ever imagined. Determined to leave, I turned to make my way out, but the door refused to budge. Panic surged through me as I pounded on it, desperation clawing at my mind. The windows, once shattered, now appeared solid and impenetrable, the outside world a distant, unreachable reality. The house seemed to shift around me, the layout changing, doors leading to nowhere, hallways stretching endlessly into darkness. Hours passed, or what felt like hours, as I wandered through the maze-like interior, the oppressive presence never leaving me. Every step I took was met with resistance, the house's malevolent energy pushing me deeper into its grasp. The sounds of the night outside were muffled, replaced by the constant, haunting whispers that echoed through the halls. Exhaustion set in, my body aching from the relentless ordeal. I found myself back in the living room, the photographs lying scattered on the floor once more. Kneeling down, I picked up another photo, one that hadn't been there before, a picture of me, taken that very day, standing in front of the house. My heart raced as I realized the horrifying truth. I was now a part of the house's endless story, forever trapped within its decaying walls. Despair threatened to overwhelm me as the whispers grew louder, their sorrowful pleas filling my mind. "Don't forget us." The words echoed endlessly, a constant reminder of the lives lost and the unresolved anguish that bound them to the house. I understood then that the shadowy figure was not just a spirit but a manifestation of the house's deep-seated pain, a vessel for the unresolved emotions of those who had once called it home. In a final act of desperation, I tried to break free from the house's grasp, tearing at the walls and doors with every ounce of strength I had left. But it was futile. The house was relentless, its malevolent presence unyielding. As I collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down my face, the whispers turned into mournful cries, their voices intertwining with my own anguish. The room began to fade, the light dimming as the house slowly dissolved into the snow-covered field outside. I felt myself being pulled out of the darkness, the cold embrace of the winter night wrapping around me like a suffocating blanket. The last thing I saw was the ghostly silhouette of the house, now just a shadow in the snow, its secrets forever hidden from the world. I awoke to the sound of my camera shutter clicking, my eyes fluttering open to the morning sun shining brightly over the field. The house was gone, replaced by an empty expanse of snow and silence. My heart pounded as I scrambled to my feet. The memory of the night's horrors etched into my mind. I hurried back to my vehicle, the camera clutched tightly in my hands, only to find that the photographs I had taken were all blank. No signs of the haunted house. No shadowy figures. Nothing but the pristine snow and empty fields. Questions swirled in my mind. Had it all been a nightmare? A hallucination brought on by isolation and fear? Or was there something more sinister at play? A force that defied explanation and sought to trap unsuspecting souls within its cursed existence? I never spoke of what happened that night, the fear too raw and the memories too vivid to share. But the photographs remained a haunting reminder of the house that once stood in the middle of nowhere. The secrets forever lost to the snowy expanse. Sometimes, when the winter winds howl through the fields, I can almost hear the faint whispers of the lost souls, their sorrow echoing through the silence. A chilling reminder that some stories are better left untold. Years later, I still visit abandoned places, drawn by the same curiosity that led me to the haunted house in Manitoba. But I tread carefully, aware now of the thin line between exploration and entrapment. The shadows of that night linger, a constant reminder that the world holds mysteries beyond our understanding, and some places are better left undisturbed, their secrets buried beneath the weight of time and snow. In the end, the haunted house taught me that some places carry the weight of untold stories, their spirits yearning for recognition and closure. And as long as those stories remain forgotten, the shadows will continue to whisper, their voices lost in the endless dance of light and darkness. Story number 4. Whispers of the Vanished Barn. December 2014. The biting cold of a Maine winter had settled over the dense forest, transforming it into a serene, snow-covered wilderness. My friends and I, Jake, Sarah, Emily, and me, decided to escape the chaos of our daily lives with a weekend camping trip. We sought solace in nature, away from the flickering lights and constant hum of the city. Little did we know, the forest held secrets that would forever alter our lives. We arrived at our chosen campsite just as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The air was crisp, the scent of pine and fresh snow invigorating our senses. Setting up our tents was a breeze, laughter and chatter filling the quiet evening as we settled in for the night. After a hearty meal cooked over an open fire, we gathered around, sharing stories and reminiscing about old times. The crackling of the fire and the whispering winds outside created a comforting ambience. It was Jake who first noticed the faint light flickering through the trees beyond our campsite. "Do you guys see that?" he asked, squinting into the darkness. I followed his gaze and saw it too, a soft, pulsating glow emanating from deep within the forest. "Probably just some camp lights," Sarah suggested, though her voice lacked conviction. Curiosity got the better of us. With flashlights in hand, we decided to investigate. The snow crunched under our boots as we ventured towards the source of the light, the beams cutting through the inky blackness. After what felt like hours, we stumbled upon an old barn, its wooden structure weathered and partially covered in snow. The light was coming from within. "That's odd," Emily remarked, her eyes wide with intrigue. "I didn't see anyone around here." We approached cautiously, the air growing colder as we neared the barn. The door creaked ominously as Jake pushed it open, revealing the interior. The barn was cluttered with old farming equipment and abandoned supplies. But what caught our attention were the strange drawings and symbols etched into the walls. They seemed almost ritualistic, patterns that defied logical explanation. Who would do something like this? Sarah pondered aloud, tracing her finger over one of the symbols. Before we could discuss further, a sudden noise echoed through the barn, a series of sharp knocks coming from the far end. We froze, exchanging nervous glances. "Did you guys hear that?" Emily whispered, her voice barely audible. Jake nodded, his usually confident demeanor wavering. "Yeah, it sounded like someone knocking on the door." We stood in uneasy silence, the only sound our own breaths mingling with the distant knocks. The temperature seemed to drop even further, our breaths forming visible puffs in the frigid air. Shadows danced on the walls as our flashlights flickered, heightening our anxiety. "I think we should leave," Sarah finally said, her voice shaking. But as we turned to exit, the barn door slammed shut with a deafening bang, plunging us into darkness. Panic surged through me as we pounded on the door, desperate to escape the oppressive atmosphere inside. "Let us out," I shouted, my voice echoing off the wooden walls. The knocks ceased immediately, replaced by an eerie silence. We were trapped, our minds racing with fear and confusion. It felt as though the barn itself was alive, its very essence intent on keeping us inside. Suddenly, the room was filled with the sound of children laughing, soft, melodic, yet undeniably unsettling. The laughter echoed around us, bouncing off the walls and making our skin crawl. "What's going on?" Jake demanded, his voice strained. Before anyone could respond, the barn began to shimmer, the air around us distorting like a heat haze. The symbols on the walls glowed faintly, pulsing in time with an unseen rhythm. The atmosphere grew heavy, the oppressive energy intensifying. "Look!" Emily pointed towards one of the walls where a new symbol had appeared, an intricate design that seemed to move and shift before our eyes. As we watched in horror, the symbols started to animate, flowing like liquid across the walls. The barn seemed to warp around us, the space bending and twisting in impossible ways. The laughter of the children grew louder, now accompanied by the faint sound of footsteps running around the perimeter of the barn. "We need to get out of here," Sarah insisted, her voice breaking. But every time we attempted to flee, the barn seemed to stretch further, the door remaining stubbornly shut. It was as if the forest had closed in on us, the vast expanse outside now an impenetrable barrier. Desperation clawed at me as I realized we were dealing with something beyond our understanding. The symbols, the laughter, the shifting space, it was all orchestrated. A macabre trap designed to ensnare us within the barn's cursed walls. As the night wore on, the barn transformed into a nightmarish landscape. Apparitions of children materialized around us, their ghostly forms flickering in and out of existence. Their hollow eyes stared blankly, their smiles twisted into expressions of eternal sorrow. One of the apparitions approached me, her transparent form flickering like a faulty light. "Don't forget us," she whispered, her voice a haunting echo in my mind. Tears welled up in my eyes as the realization dawned on me. The barn wasn't just abandoned. It was haunted by the spirits of children who had once lived, laughed, and perhaps met tragic ends within its walls. Their unfinished stories and lingering grief had bound them to the place, forever trapping them in a state of limbo. "We have to help them," I declared, my voice steady despite the fear gripping me. "We can't just leave them like this." But even as I spoke, the barn began to collapse inward, the walls closing in around us. The apparitions reached out, their ethereal hands trying to pull us back into their world of sorrow and despair. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter, pulsating with a malevolent energy that threatened to consume us. In a final act of desperation, Jake grabbed my arm, pulling me towards the door with all his might. "Come on, we have to go now." With a surge of adrenaline, we forced the door open, stumbling into the cold night air. The barn vanished before our eyes, replaced by the untouched expanse of the forest. The blue light faded, leaving us standing in the silent, snow-covered landscape as if the barn had never existed. Breathless and shaken, we looked around, trying to comprehend what had just transpired. The only evidence of our ordeal was the lingering chill in the air and the deep sense of sorrow that weighed heavily on our hearts. "We need to get back to camp," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. As we made our way through the forest, the memories of the haunted barn haunted us, the echoes of children's laughter lingering in our minds. The experience bonded us in ways we couldn't have imagined, a shared trauma that would forever tie us together. In the days that followed, We attempted to move on, but the haunting memories refused to fade. We couldn't shake the feeling that the spirits of the barn were watching us. Their sorrowful presence a constant reminder of the night we faced the supernatural. I decided to return to the site, hoping to find answers and perhaps offer some form of closure to the lost souls. Armed with determination and a newfound respect for the mysteries of the forest, I ventured back to where the barn had stood. To my astonishment, the land was barren. The spot where the barn once stood now an empty clearing with no trace of the structure or the strange symbols. It was as if the forest had reclaimed its territory, erasing all evidence of the haunted barn in a single night. Yet, as I stood there, the chill in the air intensified, and the faint sound of children's laughter echoed through the trees. I realized that some places hold onto their secrets too tightly to be forgotten, their spirits forever intertwined with the land they once called home. I left the forest with a heavy heart, knowing that the spirits of the barn would never truly find peace. Their voices would continue to whisper through the trees, their sorrow a testament to the unfinished stories that lingered in the shadows. Years have passed since that fateful night, but the memory remains vivid, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. My friends and I never spoke of the incident again, the trauma of that night too raw to revisit. But deep down, we knew that the spirits of the haunted barn were still out there, waiting for someone to remember their stories and perhaps offer them the closure they so desperately sought. The forest of Maine holds countless secrets, each tree and path a potential gateway to the unknown. And as the winters grow colder and the nights longer, the whispers of the lost children echo through the darkness, a chilling reminder that some places are better left undisturbed, their stories left untold in the shadows of the haunted woods. Story number 5. Whispers of the Blue Light. December 1997. The Kansas winter was unforgiving, a relentless expanse of snow and ice that seemed to stretch infinitely under a pale, indifferent sky. My name is John Miller, a local farmer whose roots ran deep into the heartland of America. The Miller family had tilled these fields for generations, our lives intertwined with the land that sustained us. But that year, the land whispered secrets that no one was prepared to hear. It was late November when the first reports of the blue lights began to surface. First, they were dismissed as mere trickery of the winter sun reflecting off the snow-covered plains. But as the nights grew longer and the lights persisted, a chill of unease settled over the community. Farmers spoke in hushed tones about the eerie glow that danced across their fields, vanishing as quickly as it appeared, leaving behind an unsettling silence. Mark Thompson, a neighbor and longtime friend, was the first to take it seriously. He was a man of reason, practical and grounded, someone who had weathered countless storms, both literal and metaphorical. But even he couldn't explain the phenomenon that seemed to defy logic and reason. His skepticism waned as the lights became more frequent, more intense, and Mark began to experience things that no rational mind could dismiss. It was December 10th when Mark decided to investigate the source of the lights himself. He had always been fascinated by the unexplained, a trait that sometimes led him down paths others wouldn't dare to tread. That night, armed with nothing but a flashlight, his sturdy boots, and a resolve forged by years of facing the harsh elements, Mark set out into the fields. I watched him disappear into the darkness, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the blackened landscape. The air was biting cold, each breath visible as it escaped his lips. Hours passed, the only sounds the whispering winds and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. By midnight, Mark had not returned, and a sense of foreboding crept into my heart. The next morning, the community was abuzz with worry. Searches were organized, with volunteers combing the fields and neighboring areas. But there was no sign of Mark. His truck was found abandoned near the old barn, headlights still on, as if he had just stepped out. The doors were unlocked, and his personal belongings were untouched, save for his hat left neatly on the passenger seat. As the days turned into weeks, The mystery of Mark's disappearance deepened. Some believed he had succumbed to the treacherous winter conditions, while others whispered about the blue lights being a harbinger of something far more sinister. Legends of wandering spirits and restless souls began to resurface, tales that had been buried under the weight of modern skepticism. Driven by a mix of concern and curiosity, I decided to take it upon myself to uncover the truth. The fields where Mark had last been seen were vast, the snow blanketing every trace of the earth beneath. Equipped with a heavy coat, my own flashlight, and a determination that bordered on desperation, I ventured out into the night, retracing Mark's steps. The sky was clear, the stars shining brightly above, casting a cold light over the pristine landscape. The blue glow was still there, faint but unmistakable, flickering at the edge of my vision. My heart pounded as I navigated the familiar terrain, the silence of the night pressing in around me. As I reached the old barn, memories of Mark's jovial laughter and our shared stories flooded my mind. The structure loomed ahead, its silhouette stark against the moonlit sky. The blue light seemed to emanate from within, pulsating with an unnatural rhythm. I approached cautiously, the beam of my flashlight trembling in my hand. The barn door creaked open slowly, revealing the source of the light, a makeshift altar of sorts, adorned with remnants of old farming tools and strange, luminescent stones arranged in intricate patterns. At the center stood a circle of candles, their flames flickering with an otherworldly blue hue. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, the whispers of the past echoing in the stillness. Suddenly, a chill wind swept through the barn, extinguishing the candles and plunging me into darkness. My breath quickened as I fumbled for my flashlight, the beam illuminating the room once more. There, standing in the center of the circle, was Mark, or what appeared to be Mark. His eyes were hollow, empty voids that seemed to pierce through my very soul. His form was blurred, almost ghostly, as if he were a specter from another realm. "John," he whispered, his voice a mere breath on the cold night air. "You shouldn't have come here." I took a step back, my mind racing to comprehend the apparition before me. "Mark? What's going on? Where are you?" He shook his head slowly, his expression one of profound sorrow. "The lights, they aren't just lights. They're gateways, ones that shouldn't be opened." Before I could respond, the room began to distort, the boundaries between reality and the supernatural blurring. The blue light intensified, swirling around us like a living entity, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, the realization that Mark was caught in something beyond his understanding, something that now threatened to consume me as well. "Help me, John," he pleaded, reaching out a hand that seemed to fade with each passing second. "Don't let them take you too." The ground beneath us trembled, the barn shaking violently as the blue light enveloped us both. The whispers coalesced into anguished cries, the voices of lost souls trapped in the liminal space between life and death. I felt a force pulling me towards the light, an irresistible compulsion to join Mark in his eternal torment. Summoning every ounce of willpower, I broke free from the invisible grip, stumbling towards the exit. The barn groaned and creaked, the structure buckling under the strain of the supernatural forces at play. I burst through the door, the blue light fading behind me as I raced back across the fields, the whispers lingering in my ears like a haunting lullaby. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my home, the first rays of dawn beginning to dispel the night. Mark was gone, his presence erased from the world, leaving behind only the lingering fear and unanswered questions. The blue lights continued to flicker in the distance, a constant reminder of the thin veil between our reality and the mysteries that lie beyond. In the weeks that followed, the community remained on edge, the legend of the blue lights growing stronger with each passing night. Some claimed to have seen fleeting glimpses of spirits roaming the fields, their mournful cries echoing in the darkness. Others avoided the area altogether, respecting the boundary between the living and the dead. I couldn't shake the memory of that night. The sight of Mark's hollow eyes and the desperate plea for help. The experience left me changed. A deeper understanding of the forces that govern our world and the thin line that separates peace from eternal unrest. I dedicated myself to documenting the occurrences, ensuring that the stories of those lost would never be forgotten. Their voices carried on the winds that sweep across the Kansas plains. Years later, the blue lights still appear, their haunting glow a testament to the unresolved tragedies that lie beneath the surface of our lives. The legend of Mark Thompson and the mysterious lights of Kansas serve as a chilling reminder that some mysteries are best left untouched, their secrets guarded by the restless spirits that roam the night. As I sit by my fireplace each winter, the memories of that December night flicker like the flames before me. The whispers of the past echo through my mind, urging me to remember, to honor the lost, and to respect the boundaries of the unknown. The Kansas fields remain a place of beauty and terror, their vastness holding stories of sorrow and the eternal struggle between light and darkness. And so, the blue lights continue to dance across the plains, their spectral glow a beacon for the lost and a warning for those who dare to seek the truth. The land remembers, and in its silent vigil, keeps the memories of those who vanished, their spirits forever entwined with the mysteries that lie beneath the Kansas sky. Story number 6. Echoes in the Silence. December 2008. The Swiss Alps are a breathtaking spectacle, their snow-capped peaks piercing the heavens, and valleys cloaked in a pristine blanket of white. My name is Daniel Hughes, and along with my friends, Sarah, Mike, and Laura, I embarked on what we thought would be an unforgettable mountaineering expedition. The allure of untouched trails and the promise of solitude called to us, a respite from the chaos of our daily lives. We had been trekking for days, navigating narrow ridges and crossing frozen streams, the cold biting at our skin despite the layers we wore. The camaraderie among us was strong, each of us driven by a shared passion for adventure and the serene beauty of nature. Yet, as we delved deeper into the remote areas of the park, an undercurrent of unease began to settle over the group, an unspoken tension that none of us could quite shake off. It was the fourth night that things took a turn for the Eerie. We had set up camp near a secluded plateau, the only sounds the whisper of the wind through the pines and the distant howl of a lone wolf. As we sat around the fire, sharing stories and sipping hot cocoa, the darkness outside seemed to press in closer, the shadows lengthening and dancing with an unnatural stillness. Suddenly, amidst the crackling of the flames, Sarah's voice broke the silence. "Did you guys hear that?" We all fell silent, straining our ears against the night. At first, there was nothing but the wind. But then, faintly, a voice emerged, whispered, desperate, almost inaudible. "Help me, please." Mike, ever the skeptic, laughed nervously, probably just a trick of the wind. Sarah. But there was something undeniably real about that plea. The voice seemed to come from all around us, echoing through the vast expanse of the mountains. My heart pounded as I exchanged uneasy glances with my friends. Laura suggested we investigate, but the others hesitated, fear evident in their eyes. Reluctantly, we decided to follow the sound, our flashlights cutting through the darkness as we moved cautiously away from the warmth of the fire. The voice grew louder, more distinct, guiding us deeper into the wilderness. After what felt like an eternity, we stumbled upon a clearing illuminated by the pale light of the moon. There, in the center, lay an old, tattered sleeping bag, partially buried in the snow. "Look," I whispered, pointing to the sleeping bag. Someone was here. We approached the bag, the air growing colder with each step. Lifting it, we discovered a worn journal, its pages yellowed and brittle. Mike flipped it open, revealing cramped handwriting that had clearly been hurried. The entries detailed the experiences of a man named Thomas Keller, who had ventured into the mountains years before us and had never returned. Day 12. The nights are getting colder. I hear whispers, footsteps outside my tent. I don't know what's out there, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched. Day 15. The voices are clearer now. They're calling my name, begging for help. I tried to leave, but something stops me from moving. It's like an invisible force holding me here. As we read through the journal, a sense of dread settled over us. The final entry was the most chilling. Day 20. I can't take it anymore. Tonight, I may not survive. If anyone finds this, beware the silence. It's alive. A sudden gust of wind blew through the clearing, extinguishing our flashlights and plunging us into darkness. Panic surged as the whispers returned, louder and more frantic than before. Help me, please. We fumbled to relight our flashlights, but the batteries were dead. The darkness pressing in around us like a suffocating blanket. The footsteps echoed closer, circling us, their rhythm slow and deliberate. Laura screamed, clutching her chest as an icy hand seemed to grasp her heart. Run! I shouted, grabbing Sarah's arm, but as we turned to flee, the path back to our camp was obscured by the swirling snow. The landscape transformed into an endless maze of white. Mike stumbled, tripping over an unseen obstacle. I can't move, he cried, his voice cracking with fear. The whispers intensified, the voices overlapping in a cacophony of despair. Stay, remember us. In a desperate attempt to find our way, we followed the sound of the journal's final warning. Beware the silence. It's alive. The words echoed in my mind as we navigated the treacherous terrain, every step feeling heavier than the last. Hours passed, or perhaps it was minutes. Time seemed distorted in the oppressive silence. We couldn't find our way back. The landscape unrecognizable, the mountains towering ominously around us. The whispers became a relentless torment, their pleas echoing in our ears, their sorrow filling our hearts. As dawn broke, the first light of day revealed a scene of utter desolation. Our camp was gone, the tent ripped apart, our gear scattered and buried beneath the snow. The only sign of our presence was the torn sleeping bag and the journal, now half buried and exposed to the elements. We sat huddled together, our breaths visible in the frigid air, the reality of our situation sinking in. Thomas Keller's journal had warned us, but we had ignored the signs, driven by curiosity and a misplaced sense of adventure. Days turned into weeks as we remained lost in the wilderness, surviving on minimal supplies and the dwindling hope of rescue. The whispers never ceased, their voices a constant reminder of the spirits that haunted the mountains, their sorrow and pain intertwining with our own. One night, as we huddled around a makeshift fire, a figure emerged from the shadows, a tall, spectral man clad in tattered clothing, his eyes hollow and devoid of life. It was Thomas Keller, or what remained of him. He extended a hand, his voice a mere whisper carried by the wind. You shouldn't have come here. Now you're part of the silence. Before we could react, the air grew thick with an unseen force, and the ground beneath us trembled. The whispers transformed into anguished cries, the voices of the lost intertwining with our own fear. We felt ourselves being pulled into the very heart of the mountains, our souls entwined with the restless spirits that lingered in the silence. In that moment, I understood the true meaning of the journal's final words. The silence of the mountains was not merely the absence of sound but a living entity, a guardian of secrets too dark to uncover. We had trespassed into a realm where the past and present collided, where the echoes of the lost became our own. As the darkness enveloped us, I made a silent promise to remember their stories, to honor their memories, and to ensure that their voices would never be forgotten. The mountains claimed us, their whispers now a part of our eternal silence, our existence forever intertwined with the spirits of the Mojave. Story number 7. Silent Wheels in the Mojave. December 2016. The Mojave Desert is a place where the night swallows you whole, where the vast expanse of sand and rock stretches endlessly under a canopy of stars. I had always found solace in driving through its desolate beauty, the hum of my engine and the open road a balm for my restless mind. But that night, the desert held secrets that would forever change my perception of solitude and the unknown. My name is Jack Matthews, and I was driving back to Los Angeles after a long week of work. The trip usually took around 6 hours, but the Mojave can be unpredictable, with its ever-changing weather and treacherous landscapes. I had left Las Vegas late in the afternoon, eager to escape the city's chaos and return to the relative peace of home. The highway was deserted. The only sound the steady rhythm of my tires against the asphalt and the occasional rustle of desert creatures in the underbrush. The sun had long set, leaving behind a blanket of darkness illuminated only by the moon and the stars. The temperature had dropped sharply, the air crisp and cold, making the night feel even more isolating. Around midnight, as I cruised through a particularly remote stretch of the desert, I noticed a faint, flickering light up ahead. At first, I dismissed it as a distant reflection or perhaps the malfunctioning headlights of another vehicle. But as I drew closer, the light became more defined, a classic, old-fashioned sedan parked right in the middle of the road, its headlights intermittently flashing on and off. My heart skipped a beat. Seeing a car in the middle of such a desolate area was unusual, especially at this hour. I slowed down, curiosity getting the better of me. Maybe the driver needed help or was experiencing car trouble. With caution, I approached the vehicle, the beam of my headlights cutting through the darkness. As I reached the driver's side, I saw that the door was slightly ajar. The air felt colder here, the silence almost oppressive. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to investigate. Maybe someone had accidentally left their car on the wrong side of the road. I knocked gently on the window, calling out, "Hey, are you okay?" No response. I tried the door handle, but it was locked. I glanced around, trying to spot any signs of life or movement, but there was nothing, no one, just the old sedan, parked there like a ghostly sentinel in the vast desert. Feeling uneasy but not entirely scared, I decided to take a closer look. I walked around the car, inspecting it for any clues. The exterior was dusty and worn, clearly abandoned for some time. The radio, a relic from the past, was turned on, but all I could hear was a strange, static-laden noise that seemed to come from nowhere. As I stood by the driver's side, contemplating whether to leave or stay, I heard it, a faint sound that sent shivers down my spine. It was the unmistakable sound of footsteps, echoing around the car. Yet no one was in sight. My instincts screamed at me to leave, to get back into my vehicle and drive away. But something held me in place. I turned slowly, my eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The desert around me was still, the only light coming from the flickering headlights and the soft glow of the moon. But the footsteps continued, growing louder and more persistent, circling the car as if someone or something was pacing back and forth. Panic began to rise within me. I reached for my phone, intending to call for help, but it was dead, no signal, no battery. I was alone, stranded in the middle of the Mojave with no way to communicate and an inexplicable presence lurking around my car. The footsteps stopped abruptly, replaced by a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very ground beneath me. My breath caught in my throat as I felt a presence behind me, the air thick with an oppressive energy. I spun around, trying to locate the source, but there was nothing, only the endless expanse of desert stretching out in every direction. Desperate to escape, I bolted back to my car, fumbling with the keys in the deadbolt. The door creaked open, and I dove inside, slamming it shut just as the sound of scraping metal echoed through the night. I locked the doors and backed away, my heart pounding in my chest, eyes darting around for any sign of the entity that had invaded my solitude. The radio continued to emit its strange noises, now interspersed with distant whispers that seemed to call my name. I tried to ignore it, but the sound was impossible to block out, filling my mind with a sense of dread. The footsteps resumed, now circling the car more aggressively, the growling intensifying into a menacing roar. I grabbed my flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness as I tried to make sense of what was happening. The light flickered, struggling against the shadows that seemed to pulse and breathe with a life of their own. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage, and opened the driver's side door once more. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with fear and desperation. There was no answer, only the relentless pounding of my own heart and the eerie sounds that surrounded me. I glanced back at the radio, noticing now that the static had formed into faint words, indistinct but unmistakably pleading. "Help me. Don't leave." I felt a surge of empathy, despite the fear gripping me. The words hinted at a story of loss and desperation, of someone trapped and yearning for release. But how? Who? And why here, in this desolate stretch of desert? As if in response to my unspoken questions, the air grew colder, the darkness pressing in around me. The footsteps approached, drawing closer until I could almost feel the presence looming over me. I backed away, stumbling against the seat, my mind racing for a solution. But the entity was relentless, its presence suffocating, its intent clear. I closed my eyes, willing myself to stay calm, to think rationally. But the fear was overpowering, the reality of my situation sinking in. I was alone, stranded in the Mojave Desert, with an unknown presence haunting my every move. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the sounds ceased, the footsteps halted, the growling faded into silence, and the radio returned to its static-laden noise. I exhaled slowly, the tension in my body easing, replaced by a profound sense of relief. The night was silent once more, the desert returning to its natural stillness. But the ordeal had left its mark. I sat there for what felt like hours, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. Had it been a hallucination? A trick of the mind brought on by isolation and fear? Or was there something more sinister at play? A presence that defied explanation? As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the darkness, illuminating the landscape in a soft, golden light. The desert seemed less menacing now, the shadows retreating with the arrival of day. I decided to leave immediately, eager to return to civilization and share my story, if anyone would believe it. The drive back was uneventful, the morning light reflecting off the snow and ice, creating a serene and peaceful atmosphere. But the memory of that night lingered, a haunting reminder of the thin veil between reality and the unknown. I couldn't shake the feeling that the desert had tested me, challenging my understanding of the world and the forces that lie beyond. When I arrived in Los Angeles, I tried to put the experience behind me, but the story weighed heavily on my mind. I shared it with friends and family, but their reactions were a mix of skepticism and concern. Some dismissed it as a vivid nightmare, while others offered theories of supernatural entities or the harsh psychological effects of prolonged isolation. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into research about the Mojave Desert and the legends that surrounded it. I discovered tales of the desert phantom, a spirit believed to roam the desert, preying on those who dared to venture too far from safety. Similar stories echoed the one I had experienced: unknown entities, unexplained sounds, and the eerie feeling of being watched. I reached out to local historians and paranormal investigators, piecing together a narrative that spanned decades. The stories varied, but the common thread was the presence of an unseen force that thrived in the isolation and desolation of the desert. Some believed it was a restless spirit. Others thought it was a manifestation of the desert's unforgiving nature, while a few speculated about extraterrestrial involvement. As the months passed, the story of my encounter became a part of local lore, a cautionary tale for those who dared to explore the vast and unforgiving Mojave. I continued my work, documenting and sharing the experiences of others, each story adding to the tapestry of mystery and fear that shrouded the desert. But no matter how many stories I uncovered, none matched the intensity of my own experience. The memory of the old sedan, the static-filled radio, the haunting footsteps, and the desperate plea for help remained etched in my mind. a constant reminder of the night when the desert revealed its darkest secrets. Years later, the Mojave Desert still calls to those who seek adventure and solitude. Its vast expanse holding countless stories of the unknown. The legends persist, passed down through generations, each adding layers to the mythos of the desert phantom and the forces that lurk beneath the surface. And I, Jack Matthews, continue to explore and document, driven by a need to understand the mysteries that lie within the wilds. The desert holds its secrets close, but the stories of those who have encountered the unknown serve as a testament to the thin line between reality and the supernatural. Sometimes, late at night, when the world is asleep and the desert is cloaked in darkness, I can almost hear the faint echoes of that night, the static whispers, the ghostly footsteps, and the lingering presence that once haunted my solitary drive. The Mojave remains a place of beauty and terror, a reminder that some forces are beyond our comprehension, and some stories are meant to remain shrouded in mystery. In the end, my encounter with the silent wheels and the unseen presence of the Mojave Desert taught me that the world is vast and filled with secrets that defy explanation. It's a lesson in humility, a reminder that no matter how much we think we understand our surroundings, there are always elements that remain beyond our grasp, waiting to reveal themselves in the most unexpected and terrifying ways.